Greetings, everyone, and welcome to a Fright Night Friday movie review. Today we're going to be talking about, well, hey, you know I love a good haunted house movie. I am just a sucker for a haunted house movie, I tell you. And this one came very highly recommended to me by Skinslip and Stoudman. I've been meaning to check it out for a while. Picked it up when I saw it, finally got around to watching it. We are still here. And that's what we're going to be talking about today on Fright Night Friday on the Multimedia Chronicles. Welcome back. Just quickly, I'm going to show you here. This Blu-ray is actually a reversible cover. So there's another cover underneath there. Very nice disc art. Let's just give it a quick flip around here, shall we? You can see it in all its flipped around glory. Kind of nice. This was basically something of an indie film, like a fairly low-budget indie film that got a lot of attention. There we go. There's the alternate cover. This is the cover you see most often, actually. So, I don't know. I'm kind of... I guess this... I don't know. It's hard to say which one I prefer. This one's certainly more mysterious, and when you see the movie, you'll kind of get what the imagery means here. The other one, I mean, I like the other one for its simplicity. It does kind of give things away a little bit, I guess, just as far as what the ghosts and stuff look like. But yeah, so let's put this over here, shall we? So we are still here. The thing that I first picked up on in watching this was the vibe, like this kind of a retro vibe that it was giving off. And I discovered later in the making of that was kind of the intention, was that they were going for an homage to 70s style horror. In particular, stuff like House by the Cemetery by Lucio Fulci, which you know is one that I really like. I did a review of it a number of Halloweens ago. And I've watched it several times since. It's just a wonderful, claustrophobic, effective chiller from Fulci. And We Are Still Here was very much meant to be an homage to that. In particular, and also just to 70s horror in general, like 70s Italian horror was meant to have that kind of vibe to it. And overall, I think it succeeded quite well. One of the things that always struck me about sort of that era of horror movies was very often the cast was unknowns, or unknown to us anyway. And the cast in this is largely unknowns, like actors that you won't recognize from other things. And I think that works well for it, because it just means that the you know how when you see a familiar actor, you're like, oh, it's The Rock in a haunted house, and you just can't see him as anything but The Rock, or Robert De Niro. I mean, Robert De Niro is a wonderful actor, but you still can't help but see him as anything but Robert De Niro, But with this one, I mean, you have a cast largely of unknowns. There are a few somewhat familiar faces there. There's a couple of character actors. I had to IMDb. I'm like, I'm sure I've seen that guy before. And I looked at him. It's like, oh, yeah, he was in this and that. But, overall, cast of unknowns, which I think works really well for this type of film, because it makes them more real in a way, because you don't recognize them. Also, being a low-budget film, it means they were probably cheaper to hire. But from a production standpoint, they really got lucky with this, because they were doing it kind of on a low budget, and they did a lot of it on location, and just went to this small town and filmed there, and they knew a lot of people in this small town who were in the film industry, so they were able to call in a lot of favors, and got a really cool house to use as the location, and were able to hire a lot of local actors to play the locals, and stuff like that. So really, really cool. Now, as for the film itself, I really enjoyed this a lot. There's some really good scares in it. The makeup effects on the ghosts are actually really, really well done and perfectly appropriate for what they are and why they look that way. I mean, it makes perfect sense, and it's very well done. So, starts off as a fairly straightforward haunted house movie setup. In this case, you've got an older couple, which I thought was interesting because very often you see it as young couples or teenagers or college kids or whatever. But no, here we have an old couple. They've obviously been married for a while. Their son, who is in like his 20s, in college, and he was recently killed in a car crash, and they're both kind of suffering and grieving from the loss of their son. So that's one of the reasons that they moved to this new place, is just to kind of have a fresh start away from the memories and associated with their previous place and such. And some very emotional moments as the wife is trying to cope with it. The father's trying to be the rock that she can count on, but he himself is having some, difficulty coping as well. And then, needless to say, strange things start going on in the house. Just some unexplained things, noises. One thing I found interesting is it's not always bumps in the night. There's a lot of bumps during the day as well. So these are not spirits that only come out at night. These are spirits that will mess with you no matter what time of day it is. And I like that. I like that about it. So much like House by the Cemetery, you'll see some familiar elements there, and that's very, very intentional on their part. I mean, it's meant to be a loving homage to those types of films and that era of horror films. So, for example, much like House by the Cemetery, there's something creepy and just wrong down in the basement that they're trying to figure out what's going on. And I don't want to say too much about the plot and such, because it's really one of those movies that you want to go in cold and just kind of experience it on its own. Now, occasionally, I mean, it depends on what I'm reviewing. Sometimes I'll do a spoiler-filled review if there's like really specific things I want to talk about. Other times, with a review like this, I want you to see the movie. So if you haven't seen it, I want to entice you to see it. So basically, if you like 70s horror, if you've got a strong stomach, there's some pretty intense gore scenes in this, like really intense. And if you like a good ghost story, you like haunted house movies, you're in for a treat. I should mention also jump scares. I see people talk about jump scares all the time in relation to horror movies, and they complain. It's like, oh, jump scare, blah, blah, blah. It's like, it's a horror movie. Of course there's going to be jump scares. There is jump scares in every horror. Why are you complaining about it? If you don't like that, then you don't like horror movies. I'm sorry. Jump scares are a part of the genre. Accept it, or stop watching horror movies and complaining about it, because it's not going to change, ever. Now, I need to add to that, though. There is such a thing as, I've talked about this with Skinslip before, there's a thing called motivated jump scares and unmotivated jump scares. An appropriate jump scare is when something happens that scares a character in the movie. So they get scared, so the jump is you getting scared along with them. That's an appropriate jump scare. An inappropriate jump scare is when something happens that is solely to scare you, the audience. That's just kind of a cheap scare. Now, that said, I counted precisely one such jump scare in this movie. Now, that said, even though it was technically unmotivated, in this case, I think we can let it go because it was quite effective. It was something scary happening in the room that the characters didn't necessarily notice. We, the audience, do, and we get scared about it. But that's just kind of a letting the audience in on something before the characters discover it thing. You can bend the rules sometimes. Rules aren't always hard and fast. Sometimes, when it's appropriate, you can bend them or flat out break them. In this case, this one unmotivated jump scare, I think, was fine. I didn't have a problem with it, and that was that. Now, the rest of the jump scares, they are definitely motivated, and they will get you. They will get you good. Now, that said, this is not all about jump scares. Far from it. What this is a slow burn movie that is, for the most part, takes its time to build the story and build the suspense and build the mystery surrounding what went on in this house, what is the motivation of the ghosts, what are they after, what kind of danger are the characters in. And the thing I like about it is there's more to it than just what's going on in the house. There's also the town itself. There's something about the town that factors into the events in that house. And that's all I'm going to say about that. You're going to have to watch the movie to find out. But there's a lot of layers to the mystery. And if you're a fan of 70s horror like I am, you will pick up on a lot of different references. Again, very intentional. This is meant to be kind of a hodgepodge of homages, while at the same time putting a bit of a fresh spin on it. I mean, kind of a modern take on 70s style horror, I guess is what you can call it. And I think it works phenomenally well. I had an absolute blast with this movie. It scared the shit out of me. And I mean, I really liked the cast. I really liked the story. I really liked the visual style of it. It's actually set in the 70s. Like, if you keep track of the dates that they mentioned throughout the movie, you can place it at about 1979, I think, is when it's supposed to take place. So you have retro-style clothes. You have classic cars that they borrowed from the locals, apparently, to do the movie. If you have a sharp eye, you will pick up on a few 21st century things lurking around, but cars in the background that they missed or what have you. But for the most part, it very much captures the era and the look and feel of that era very, very nicely. And it's even shot in CinemaScope, so you have that super wide widescreen that a lot of films from that era did. And good times. So yeah, we are still here. Great stuff. You'll want to be still there too. Yeah. I'm really glad to see more sort of I don't know, classy horror movies out there lately. We've seen quite a spate of them in recent years, and I'm hoping that it's a resurgence in the horror genre, because quite frankly I feel like the horror genre has been kind of stagnating lately with a lot of the PG-13 stuff and just cookie cutter horror movies, stuff that really brings nothing new to the genre. So with something like this is a real treat, because it takes something old but at the same time gives us something new and gives us like a modern take on these old ideas. It's like a 70s horror film, as they described it, a 70s horror film with a modern aesthetic, with in terms of the gore effects and whatnot, and things like that. And it's great. I hope that we see more stuff like that. I mean, there's been some great films over the past few years in the horror genre. I mean, stuff like this. You got The Babadook, of course. You got It Follows. I really want to see that new one, The Witch, which I've heard is really good. And you've had some great found footage films, which I talked about a little while ago. Just some terrific, innovative stuff out there if you look around for it. And it's getting easier and easier to find, which is wonderful. So please, horror genre, keep it up, because I'm loving the journey. Alrighty. Quick thank you to my Patreon sponsors. Hey! Thanks, Patreon sponsors. You guys and gals are awesome, especially Get Your Gorgeous On, the wonderful e-mag maintained by Michelle O'Toole and Simon Hedger, and, of course, Kyle Pellegrini, all my highest-level sponsors right there. Very awesome, guys. Really appreciate the support. Alrighty, that is it for this Fright Night Friday, so I will see you next time. Until then, thanks for watching, and sayonara.